What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? I found this red juicy strawberry while watering today. I'm really impressed with these strawberries and I want to grow way more next year. This strawberry plant caught a stray branch last night during a thunderstorm. It's injured, but I think it'll make it. I'm staying on top of watering my containers every single day. And when you think about it, a lot of the rain is just falling off the leaves and not getting into the soil of these buckets. So watering these after a storm is kind of crucial. My whole garden needed watering today actually. It's still like 90 degrees outside. And watering these tomatoes every day is super important. They're very finicky, but some of them might have had a little too much water lately. This isn't like end rot, this is more of the skin bursting when it gets too much water. That's probably a horrible way to explain this, and I'm sure people in the comments can do a much better job than I. And this one's the clearest example. I mean, look at that. And this is just the funkiest looking tomato in my whole garden. I pruned away some dead leaves, and I'm really disappointed in my tomatoes this year. I should be disappointed in myself, however. I'm the one that decided to grow them in buckets. I'm the one that decided to grow this variety. I'll really have to reconsider my strategy for tomatoes over the winter. At least I'm harvesting actual tomatoes. Let's see how some of my vegetables are doing in August in the Nebraska Garden. This loofah plant has exploded in growth. I see these flower clusters everywhere, and this is the first loofah gourd I've seen. After a big thunderstorm, a lot of my zinnias blossomed. In the greenhouse, my basil seed sprouted, but my parsley hasn't yet. I harvested an okra, and I checked on this cantaloupe. Soon enough, it'll fall right off the vine. And of course I had to harvest some peppers. Sometimes they do grow a little strange, but they still taste good. And how about an eggplant? Why not? And that's just the first of many August harvests to come. What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? I checked on these young watermelon plants. It looks like I have my first little baby watermelons flowering right now. That's so cool. I checked on my strawberries, and this one looks like it's a double strawberry. Not the first time this happened in my garden this year. The strawberry's so juicy it stained my hand when I picked it. And this strawberry's a little too juicy. I think I might have left it on the vine too long. That's okay, there's still plenty more flowering. Then I thinned out my radishes. Some of the criteria for thinning plants for me, personally, are things like size, maturity. It's not an exact science. Sometimes you really do just have to eyeball and hope you're right. And I know I installed these T-posts upside down on my cucumber trellis. That was very embarrassing to find out, but you know what? It's kind of funny, and it makes it easier to tear out at the end of the season, so I'll keep it until October. I helped my cucumber find its way up the trellis and remembered my loofah plant that I had in this container. It somehow found its way to the top of my greenhouse. That gives me a lot of interesting ideas using the greenhouse as a trellis next year. I have so much to think about over the winter. What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? This is a squash bug. As the name implies, they like to hang around squash plants. I plucked the little fella off my zucchini and put him in a cup of soapy water. Looks like it had a partner in crime. I made sure to snag this one too. And it looks like a ton of little larvae have hatched. I'm not sure exactly what these are though, but I'm entirely sure that these are squash bug eggs. It's very important to get rid of these when you see them. I need to keep a close eye on this problem and make sure I squash any of the bugs. This cantaloupe looks ripe and delicious when you take a look at it, but under the surface I saw some concerning marks. Reminds me of how a tomato splits open when it gets too much water. The cantaloupes hanging on my trellis don't have this problem, but they are a little smaller than the ones I'm growing on the ground. This makes me think there's some validity to giving your plant support on the trellis. I wasn't sure if that was a myth or not. And the leaves on my green onions started to brown. I know that's usually a sign to harvest the onions, so I pulled one out to see what it looked like. I've never really seen one of these, so I wasn't sure what to expect right out of the dirt. Should I harvest more? Let me know. And if you want to be a part of an online community where you can ask questions just like this, join the Beginner Gardeners Club Discord. Check out the link in the description. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I harvested my first round of good tomatoes. I say good tomatoes because these have been anything but all season, but you can see the excitement in my face when I find a few good tomatoes. I picked them when they were this orange-yellow color so they could ripen on the counter. You don't want to wait until they're fully red to harvest. That's what conventional gardening wisdom says anyway. I'm just so happy to finally get some fruit off of these. Not sure what these little guys are doing. These little guys, on the other hand, are going crazy for my loofah gourd, and so am I with the way these are looking. I'm debating whether or not I want to try eating these or letting them dry out and become sponges. What do you think I should do? All those tomatoes got me in a harvesting mood, so I paid a visit to my peppers. And I did not expect to see this when I harvested these. These look totally fine from the outside, but upon closer inspection, 3 out of the 4 of these peppers I wanted to harvest are in not so good shape. So strange. I guess I have to pay better attention. I have to pay more attention to these lunchbox peppers too, because they grow fast. And this one grew into a little hook, and this one's got a conjoined peppered twin coming out of the stem. I love seeing weird stuff like this in the garden. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I found this interesting insect in my cucumber bed. I have no clue what it is, but I think he's super rad, so I just relocated him. I think these cucumbers are super rad as well. And this loofah gourd is caught on its own plant's little tendril there. There you go, little fella. Now let's see if it recovers its shape. I let these shapely okra grow a bit too large. You're supposed to cut okra when they're shorter. Fact or fiction? I don't know. I haven't started pickling these yet. I really need to. And every single day I check on this cantaloupe, hoping and praying that it'll... Oh, yeah, that's what I was hoping for, just to snap off the stem like that. Perfect. That's how you know they're ripe. The first time I ever tried cantaloupe was actually on my honeymoon. We had a huge bag left over from our wedding, and we brought it with us, and my wife and I were snacking on it the entire time. So I have fond memories of cantaloupe, and I love that I can grow it in my own backyard. The best part about growing cantaloupe is eating it. First things first, cut it in half, scoop out the guts. Really gotta get in there. I love to cut each half into 4 quarters, and cut the skin off then. Just makes for a smooth process. I chopped it up and put them in this gallon bag. Time for the taste test. Fresh cantaloupe is the best cantaloupe you'll ever have. Oh, gotta pay the tax. Let's check on some of the plants I'm growing in August in the Nebraska garden. First off are these strawberries. I planted these back in April. These were pretty slow to grow, but oh so worth it. I'm all out of seeds though, so I'll need to salvage them off my strawberries for next season. My Roma tomatoes are finally ripening. I sowed these on March 1st and transplanted them into buckets at the end of May. The most important thing about growing tomatoes like these in buckets that I learned this year is water consistently. I water every single day at the exact same time, and I used to deal with a lot of blossom end rot, and the problem has pretty much gone away. In fact, there's signs that I'm watering too much, such as splitting tomatoes like this, but they're pretty rare to find. But of course, I'm a beginner gardener myself, so please take anything I say with a grain of salt. I'm just going off my instincts most of the time. I planted these watermelons on the 5th of July and they're looking great. The foliage looks good and they're even starting to flower. I've seen that pinching off the first few flowers helps leaf production, but this late into the season, I'm just gonna let them grow. Let's see what happens. Let's check on some of the plants I'm growing in August in the Nebraska garden. I planted these cucumbers on July 8th. On one side of the trellis are Gershwin cucumbers, and on the other side is a garden sweet hybrid. I am loving the size of these right now and can't wait until they reach the top of this trellis. I will be swimming in cucumbers. The vines on this trellis though, I might have let my spaghetti squash go a little too long. I transplanted these back in May and sowed the seeds in April. I harvested the ones that were ripe or close to ripe and left a few more on just to see what'll happen. I'm not holding out for much though. I transplanted these arugula when I planted my cucumbers, but I have no clue when I sowed the seeds. I could not tell you that. I think arugula is one of the most underrated veggies you can grow in your garden. They grow tons of leaves, they taste delicious. I understand not liking the bitterness, but you can cook that away. I really recommend planting arugula. It doesn't even look like I harvested that much, but I filled the entire bowl here. And last but definitely not least, my zucchini are popping up. I sowed these zucchini back at the end of June and transplanted them into the bed exactly 1 month later. I'm so excited to start eating zucchini every day again. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I harvested some more of my Roma tomatoes. While my tomatoes haven't produced exactly as I hoped they would this year, I'm still pretty happy with them. I mean, this is why I garden. Free food is better than no food at all. And I think I've harvested enough tomatoes by this point to start canning them. I'll need to watch a few tutorials first. You gotta be careful with that stuff. And I haven't pickled any cucumbers yet either, so I really need to get started on some of these projects I've been putting off. I found another ladybug larva on my okra here. What a little hero. A bug I was not excited to see was this squash bug. I found him hanging around my cantaloupe. In the soapy water you go, Buster. I'm slightly concerned about my cantaloupe, but not really because of that one squash bug. The cantaloupes growing on the ground look pretty weird, like juices are seeping out or bugs have been trying to get in there. This one that was growing on the trellis doesn't have any of those problems at all, really. And here's another one from off the ground that just looks gross. I don't know how else to put it. Definitely something to watch out for next time I grow cantaloupe. Still happy with the harvest though. Here are some of the bugs I found today in the Nebraska garden. First off is this bee. Right now it's pollinating one of my cucumber flowers. This is great news. My young cucumbers are in full bloom right now, and it's really important that they stay pollinated. These cucumbers are nearing the end of their life cycle, it seems. The color fades lighter down the cucumber on most of them, and they have these little brown spots. They taste a little bitter too. I'm worried that cucumber beetles like this may be the cause. It does look like a ladybug, but I assure you it's not. The yellow is a dead giveaway. You want to get rid of these guys, but unfortunately I lost him. And is this really a ladybug? This seems to be the larva that I found yesterday. There were a few comments contesting which kind of bug it was, so I'm not really sure. Checking on my zucchini, I haven't seen any squash bugs in a while, but I am going to cover the stem of this plant back up. I'm still a little worried about the squash vine borer. I checked under the leaves for eggs and any kind of insect I could find. I found these really little ones that I'm not quite sure if you can even tell what it is. I sure can't. And this is a green lacewing. This is the kind of bug you love to see in your garden. Natural predator to aphids. There's a reason I call these the bodyguard of the garden. Let's see how my plants are doing in August in the Nebraska garden. This loofah gourd grew way more than I was expecting. I didn't realize they could grow this large. I'm definitely letting this loofah dry out and turn into a sponge. My radishes have been enjoying the cool weather lately. Looks like they're right on track. I think a bunny might have gotten to my young lettuce here. A few more are still intact, but I'm not sure how long that'll last. You know what? I'm fine with it. They're cute. I only had one Swiss chard pop up out of everything I planted. My marjoram is still growing, although I'm not quite sure how to use it effectively, and my zinnias are still in full bloom. These are going to be a staple in the garden from now on. And this dill plant, well, it survived. That's more than I can say for the rest of my herb garden. So I made room for these basil sprouts. And I harvested more peppers, as is tradition. One of my favorite things to do with peppers now is chop them up and roast them with tomatoes, and then blend it all together to make this delicious red pasta sauce. I won't be doing that with these peppers, however. It looks like some bugs got to them. If I had a nickel for every time this happened in my garden this year, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. I guess 3 times. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? This loofah gourd will not stop growing. It feels like every single day I'm amazed by how much it's grown since the last. And this loofah snuck up on me. I had no clue it was even there. Definitely the tallest plant in my garden. These cucumbers are climbing their trellis just fine. The first little baby cucumbers appeared at the base of the plant. I'd rather these show up a little higher on the trellis, but I'll never complain about my veggies producing. My zucchini have shot up in size as well. There's even a little one growing already. I've kept a really good eye on bugs this time. I think I got rid of the squash bug problem. Or at least I hope so. Then I harvested some tomatoes. I like to pick these when they're almost red and there's still a little bit of yellow-green on them. They ripen on the counter just fine. And this pepper looks amazing. The color on it is just so perfect. But this one's not that bad. Despite not being fully red, it still tastes delicious. Had to throw in a little lunchbox pepper too. And I love picking random strawberries that pop up. It's a little gardener's treat. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I harvested some cucumbers, which have been a little scarce lately. These plants are getting older and they've already had their main crop of the season, but they're still flowering and hey, I'm enjoying the cucumbers all the same. They do get a little more bitter as the plant gets older, so you win some, you lose some. And then I found more zucchini popping up. Here's a quick zucchini tip. The female flowers form on the fruit. The male flowers just form on the plant. If you're having a problem with your zucchini, try hand pollinating. Just introduce the male flower to the female flower when they're open. And this raised bed turned into quite the watermelon patch. The snap peas I planted in spring gave a lot of nitrogen back to this soil. I found a lot of little flowers, very exciting. After harvesting all my cantaloupe, I'm seeing a lot less flowers than before. The cantaloupe escaped the garden along my fence here, and the majority of the plant's flowers are now over here. I might have to reinforce this fence if the fruits start growing. I would be very happy to get stuck with a project like that. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? Whenever I'm not sure what to do in the garden or just don't have any motivation, I like to water my plants. Watering your plants is a great excuse to make any inspections. Whenever I water these zucchini, I make sure to check under the leaves for any squash bug eggs. Watering every single container every day helps me stay on top of harvesting as well. Sometimes you just lose track of all the ripe little peppers. If you're ever unsure if you need to water, just stick your finger right in the dirt. If it's dry, then it's time to water. This isn't true for every single plant, so your watering should be catered to each plant's individual needs. While watering these watermelons, say that 5 times fast, I noticed it was time to pick some of these arugula. I usually just grab leaves and come back, but in this bed I decided to take out the whole plant. I chopped off the stem and left it back in the dirt. It'll naturally break down in there, and I might only harvest arugula like this from now on. It's very convenient, and I'll always stop for a fresh strawberry, or 2, or 3. I really didn't know what to do in the garden today, and the result was a harvest full of variety, and I couldn't be happier. Let's see how some of my plants are doing in August in the Nebraska garden. I planted these sugar baby watermelons on July 5th, and boy are they quick to produce. It must be a smart plant too, because it climbed up my green onions like a trellis. That's not what they mean when they say companion planting, but I'll take it. And these cucumbers are flowering all over now. I planted these on July 8th. The first batch of cucumbers you get is always the best. I'm so excited for these. My zucchini looks good except for the fact that the squash bug eggs have returned, but that's why I check the leaves every single day. You gotta stay on top of this stuff. And look at that, boom, squash bug. Get smushed, kid. I'm very happy with how these zucchini are growing. I'm guessing within a week I'll have more zucchini than I know what to do with again. Such a good feeling. This loofah gourd is definitely the biggest thing I've ever grown, and I think a little cantaloupe might have found its way over here. A little traveler. And these lunchbox peppers are looking amazing. I'm so glad I started these all the way back in February. I highly recommend starting your peppers early. I think it's so worth it. And I like to grow a wide variety. It helps to keep the gardening fun and interesting. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I'll be going on a little trip soon and my wife asked me to show her around the garden. I showed her my watering routine and she really wanted to harvest some peppers. Usually she leaves me alone in the garden, but I was really happy she wanted to join me today. She's been really supportive of the garden throughout this entire process, and I don't think I could have kept up with these daily videos without her. So this is an appreciation post for her. She really does know how to pick a good looking pepper. We pruned the tomatoes together and she picked a few more veggies. It's a pretty good first harvest and I hope it's her first of many. Here are things in the Nebraska garden that just make sense. Compost bucket. I made the mistake of building my compost pile really far from my garden. And by really far, I mean a short walk across my yard. I had an empty pot laying around and it made for a great trash can. I sowed a loofah seed in this container as an experiment. All it's done is climb up my greenhouse and it doesn't look too healthy, but I think it's funny so I keep it around. Janky hand-me-down trellises that aren't big enough to support my plants, and way more containers than I really need. I like to move my plants around a bit. And wood is expensive, I got the buckets for free. And beautiful zinnias to attract pollinators to my garden. That one makes the most sense. Ranking every vegetable in the Nebraska Garden, radishes. Radishes should be the first vegetable that every beginner gardener grows. They're frost resistant and you can start them in early spring. They're very quick to produce, most you can harvest within a month. You can plant 16 into a single square foot, which means you get more out of your space with radishes than most other plants. And they're very simple. They form a little root bulb that you eat, and you can also eat the leaves if you want. I personally don't, but that just comes down to preference. Radishes are a little spicy, if you have zero spice tolerance like me, that is. You'll know it's time to harvest a radish when it sticks its head out of the ground. For these red radishes, the pink color is another dead giveaway. To harvest, you simply pull it out of the ground. It's that easy. To store radishes, clean the dirt off the roots, but leave the roots on, and chop off the leaves right at the bottom, so there's a little green left on the bulb. The leaves on my radishes have been eaten up by bugs, but that doesn't really affect the roots, so I'm not too worried. Of course, your results may vary. For their speed to harvest, space efficiency, and ease of growing, I rank radishes a solid A. Ranking every vegetable in the Nebraska Garden, zucchini. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think zucchini is the perfect vegetable for any beginner gardener. I had more zucchini than I knew what to do with this summer, which is a great feeling to have. Zucchini also don't take that long to get started. I sowed my first seeds back on April 1st and transplanted them during the first week of May. This is my second round for the year because I didn't stay on top of squash bugs the first time around, but I'm checking the leaves for eggs and making sure I get rid of any squash bug I find, so I'm hoping these zucchini last until the end of the season. There are so many different ways that you can cook and prepare zucchini. You can slice it up and fry it, throw it on the grill, stuff it and put it in the oven, shred it and bake it into bread or cake. The possibilities are endless with zucchini. And you can grow enough to store plenty over the winter. I know I have. So purely out of my own positive experiences with the plant, I'm ranking zucchini A+. What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? I let the spaghetti squash plant die out, but I had a good reason. I've been dealing with squash bugs all summer long. They wreaked havoc on my zucchini and these spaghetti squash, so I thought I'd lay a little trap. And just as I predicted, the squash bugs like to hide under the spaghetti squash. They like to hide in dark areas. That's why some people suggest you lay a board down in your garden. All of the squash bugs will make their way under the board during the day, and when you lift it, you just take care of all of them at once. The best way I found to deal with squash bugs is to either smush them, or if there's a lot like this, get a cup of soapy water and just pluck the squash bugs into the cup. Before I started gardening, I was really grossed out by bugs, and it was really difficult for me to start just grabbing the little guys, but eventually I got used to it. And don't worry, they can't really hurt you. They do hurt your plants though, so it's worth it to take care of them. Ranking every vegetable in the Nebraska Garden, peppers. This year I grew 3 different varieties of sweet peppers, lunchbox peppers, red knights, and sweet sunrises, and I've been happy with each variety for different reasons. The lunchbox peppers because they produce a ton of tiny peppers, and while the red knights produce less, they produce huge peppers, and the sweet sunrises are somewhere in the middle. I started all of these peppers from seed at the beginning of February, and they grew inside under grow lights before I moved them out to the greenhouse at the beginning of May. I transplanted them into these buckets on May 15th. I literally cannot eat these peppers fast enough. They just keep producing more, and I just keep harvesting more. I feel like growing these peppers is one of the biggest accomplishments I've made as a gardener. It took a lot of dedication and a lot of patience, and a fair chunk of change too, but it was totally worth it. They taste delicious, they're a little tricky to take care of, but if you water correctly and give it the right nutrients, you will be rewarded. Because of the bounty I've received this summer, offset by a bit of the difficulty involved, I would rank peppers A-. What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? I was welcomed home from my vacation by all of these zucchini that popped up. It's been about a month, but I'm ready to become the crazy zucchini guy again. I'm very impressed with the health of all of these, and I was worried the squash would be too big, but these are the perfect size to harvest. Some people say the flavor is better when you harvest them a little bit smaller, but this is the size I like to harvest them at. Another welcome surprise were these cucumbers. This is my second round of cucumbers for the year, and I grew 2 varieties. This one is a Gershwin, which I already grew, and this one is a Garden Sweet hybrid. And after harvesting, I can tell you these really live up to their name. They're so sweet. The best cucumber will always come straight from your own garden. My older cucumber plants are not looking that good though, but they're still producing. I'm just gonna let it go until it dies out. And while I was away, some of these cucumbers got a little plump. Somehow it seems like these loofah gourds are still growing. I've only seen 3, but I wouldn't be surprised if another one was hiding from me. In this bed, I found a little cantaloupe, and I found 2 more hanging out by my pepper buckets, and a 3rd one over here. This is the most overgrown area of my garden. I'd rather take a messy garden that's full of food than a clean garden that doesn't have any. Here's my reaction seeing how many peppers I had to harvest today in the Nebraska Garden. I'm not kidding when I say it was the biggest single day harvest I've ever had, but let me just show you. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I harvested these Roma tomatoes. I need to start going on vacation more often because every time I do I come home to huge harvests. Some of my tomatoes are split like this, but that's okay. They just took in water a little too quickly. You can easily cut around it and the tomato will be just fine. What's not just fine is blossom end rot like this. I have a special place for tomatoes like these. I like to call it the compost bucket. Swish. The best way I found to combat blossom end rot is to water consistently. I water every day at the same time, and I'm pretty happy with the results I'm getting. I'm also happy that these sugar baby watermelons have developed. It looks like they'll be full size in no time, or at least I hope so. And some of these crimson sweets have even started growing. Fingers crossed they'll be ready before the first frost of the season. I might have grown too many cucumber plants in one area. They're getting a little cramped, but I'm still harvesting, so I didn't make that big of a mistake. Sometimes gardening's just about winging it. You'll learn from your mistakes, maybe. Let's see how many vegetables I can harvest on a rainy day in the Nebraska garden. Luckily, the rain didn't last too long. I started by harvesting some eggplants. Of all the veggies in my garden, eggplants just don't excite me as much as everything else. They're probably first on the chopping block to not be grown next year. I enjoy eating them, but it's not something I ever really crave. Some veggies that I do crave all the time are these peppers. I have an overabundance of these little lunchbox peppers, and every time I harvest these, they just keep getting smaller and smaller. I think that's because the plant keeps producing more flowers. Maybe I need to start paying more attention and pinching some off, but it's getting close to the end of the growing season and the motivation is dwindling. Still, I'll never complain about a harvest like this. I'm still complaining about blossom end rot on my tomatoes though. If I see a red tomato at this point, there's about a 50-50 chance that it's good to eat, and that's better than I was doing earlier this summer, so I'll take it. And then I picked some of these volunteer arugula from my watermelon bed. This will make a great salad later, and I couldn't think of a better thing to go with my salad than scallions from my green onions. Who needs the grocery store when you have a garden like this? Let's see how my vegetables are doing at the end of August in the Nebraska garden. My zucchini is looking good as always. I'm really trying to stay on top of harvesting this time around, especially with little squash bugs like this guy roaming around. Just give you a little smush here. A harvest a day keeps the pests away. After just a couple days, these crimson sweet watermelons have almost tripled in size. I wonder how big of a watermelon I can grow this year. I'd be extremely happy if it was anywhere close to the size of this loofah. Funny thing about these, I don't think they ever stop growing. These cantaloupes have nestled themselves into a shady spot. They can hide from the sun and they can hide from me too. I have a hard time finding these. I don't have a hard time finding any cucumbers though. I harvested this one a little too early, but this one is just the right size. Ring ring cucumber phone. And then I harvested a thicker Gershwin cucumber, perfect for pickling. My peppers are definitely the pride of my garden, and these sweet sunrises are the perfect deep orange. Just look at how that thing shines in the sun. I'll grab a couple more of these. You can never have too many peppers. That's my justification for growing so many of these anyway.